All right, if you're following along now or later on Discord, I uploaded some sample footage that I'll be working with today. Some different scenarios. The approach that we use for green screen or live action is the same. There are maybe some other steps that you might have to take, like rotoscoping and such. But inside of this zip file, there are just some test images that I like to use sometimes, throwing a grid on the floor to make sure that it's not sliding around, using some test images. There's also some footage to work with here. It's not that most exciting footage. It's just walking through a studio. And here is garden footage that I'll be using. PNG sequence. If you do have video file, remember that you should convert that to an image sequence. So, if you're shooting on a camera and it outputs an MP4 or whatever, that's fine. Just convert it to an image sequence, because when you bring it into Unreal, you can bring video files into Unreal. But for our case, we want image sequences because we want one frame in Unreal to equal one frame of footage. So here's this big folder of images. I guess apparently there's also a tracking map. Forgot, this is pretty old, but there's a tracking map here to cut her out if you wanted to cut her out. There's also this green screen footage that I stole from somewhere a long time ago. Has a little camera movement, little camera dolly here. Tracking marks. It's easy because she holds still. So those are the footages that we'll be working with. We'll see how many we get to use. Probably just the garden one, but we'll see. We're recording, right? Check, check. Fingers crossed we don't crash. I'm running Unreal and After Effects and Blender and OBS and Cinema 4D all at the same time right now. I think I'm also remote desktop in my desktop computer. So Godspeed. We'll see what happens. All right, so let's just start. First step. We need to track the footage. I'm not going to use the garden footage to start with. Maybe we'll track the green screen footage too, but we might just take the garden footage all the way through the pipeline. So After Effects 101 here, right-click in the project window, File, browse to wherever that folder is, which I'm not exactly sure where it's at. There we go. A tracking, examples. So starting raw. All right. Important when you're importing image sequences into After Effects, or a lot of softwares actually. Some softwares require you to check a little box saying that it's an image sequence and not an individual file. So I select the first one, pick, in this case, PNG sequence, import. All right, right-click on it and go to New Comp from Selection. And now it's in my timeline. This is a live demo. Anybody wants to stop me whenever. Sometimes I tend to go fast through things, and I don't want anybody to be left behind. All right, so here's the footage. It's like 240 frames or something like that. How many frames is it? 243 frames. So we need to track this, and using the 3D camera tracker in After Effects is very easy. So you just click on the layer, in your composition. Just single click. If you're not super familiar with After Effects, in compositions in After Effects are sort of like sequences in Premiere. Also, there's these tabs up top here. When we are working in the composition, we want to be clicked on the composition tab. Sometimes you can accidentally double click on this and you will now be in the layer tab instead of the composition tab. It's easy enough to just go and click on the composition tab and you're back there. So composition tab, selected on the footage. Let's go over to the right side and you should see a tracker menu. It might not be expanded. Just click it once and it will expand. And you can go to track camera. Track camera, and it will start tracking. Just let it do its thing. This 3D camera tracker does an okay job at most things. It's not great. And if the shot is particularly difficult at all, it does a bad job. But if there's a lot of stuff to track and there's enough camera movement, it does a pretty all right job. And now, like I talked about earlier, there are many more pro solutions that will give you much better results, but they all have pretty steep learning curves, and some of them are not very cheap at all. So that's why we use After Effects, because it's essentially free for everybody these days. Blender's tracking is okay. It's very manual, although you can do automatic mode, but it's a lot more manual than this is. And that's possible to use. I'm not super well versed with Cinema 4D's tracking, but I imagine it's similar to Blender's. And then there's a lot of programs that just do tracking. That's all they do. Okay, so this finished, and it might be hard to see, but there's a bunch of little candy colored little X's all over the footage. And if I take my mouse and zoom around, I get this little like red target icon bouncing around. Let's make these points a little bit bigger so you can see. This is not crucial to the process, but if you can change the size of the points and you can change the size of the target. So now you can see the points, right? Notice as I scrub the points, some pop into existence and disappear. Also, there's points on everything. Oops. The points disappear when I do that. There's points on everything. The ground, the plants in the background, the building in the background. We are trying to solve for the ground. So I'm going to select some points on the ground. Notice while I'm hovering around on the ground that the target kind of changes its orientation based on the triangle that gets selected. What's happening right now is the software is picking 3 points. We need 3 points to determine the angle of our ground. And as I move this around, you can see that it changes depending on which points are selected. That's because some of these points are like the top of the piece of the dirt. Some of them are the piece of grass. Some of them are the low point of dirt. So if you drew a triangle between those points, it would be skewed, right? This is kind of a tricky example here because the ground is not flat. If this was a perfectly flat ground, we would get better results. Let's not say that we can't get decent results with this. It's just something to be aware of. And this is why I like to select multiple dots rather than just 3. We're kind of averaging out between them. So we can do that just by lassoing them up. So scrub to a good point where there's quite a bit of dots. And then I'm going to select a bunch. I'm not going to select her because she is not the ground. And I take a look at that target. Does that look like it's the ground? It's a little tilted to the right a little bit, maybe. Does that look like it's the ground? Does this look like it's the ground? Is that? Well, the truth is somewhere in there. You keep selecting until you feel like, yeah, that looks good. I think that looks all right. Like I said, not perfect in After Effects, but okay. When I'm happy with that, with those points selected, I right-click on the target, and go to Create Solid and Camera. But before we do that, it's very important to do this step. In the right-click menu, you want to go to Set Ground Plane and Origin. What this is doing is saying this is the ground, 0. And the middle of this target, the middle of the bullseye there is 0, 0, 0. Setting the ground plane and the origin. So right-click, set ground plane and origin, and then right-click again, create solid in camera. All right, so now I have that little red shape. And if I play, this should stick to the ground. Easy, right? So it shouldn't look like it's sliding around or anything. If it was to look like this, can you tell it's not stuck to the ground? It looks like it's tracked, but it's floating. A couple problems that you could have. This is not that bad of a problem because maybe you don't want something on the ground. Maybe you do want it to float, right? A real problem would be if it just didn't match up. Like the camera went this way and the object went this way. There would be something's wrong with the tracking. But in this case, it's just because I just raised the solid shape up. You don't need to raise the solid shape up. I was just showing you an error. Some other things that I like to do is maybe bring in my, I have those imported, checkerboard. Yeah. Sometimes I like to bring in a checkerboard and put it on the ground instead of the solid. You could also go in After Effects in the layer and you could scale this guy up or down. Now it doesn't look that aligned, to be honest. It's definitely tracked, but maybe the ground is skewed. I think it's good enough for now, though. Sometimes I like to put a little grid, though, little checkerboard pattern to check things out. That's why I gave you that checkerboard image in the zip file. Quick little After Effects trick. This has nothing to do with tracking. It's just if you take some sort of content, whether it's an image or even a movie file, and you want to replace, in this case, the red solid with the checkerboard, just select the solid, go and grab onto the thing you want to replace it with and hold down Alt or Option and drag it on top, and it will replace with all of the other settings like the position and everything locked in. Position and rotation stays the same. Sometimes I like to do this and maybe lower down the opacity, maybe scale it up a little bit more. Just to see what it looks like. It does look like it's sticking. Pretty good. Now this is a 2.5D program, not a 3D program. So I can't do, I can't put 3D objects in here. What I could do though is I could stand up, I could take flat planes and I could make a world of flat planes, sort of like making little playing card houses out of playing cards, stacking them together. Could do something like that. I could take this checkerboard, I could duplicate it. Oops, I could duplicate it. And I could maybe rotate it 90 degrees. This is not important to the process. This is just like playing around and being happy with your track, sort of a thing. So I could lower this down. I could make the opacity solid. Oops. Oops, don't want to raise the height. So now I have this vertical surface in the world. You create like a whole fun 2.5D thing just with this idea. Some of the surface is above the ground, some is below. Maybe we want to move it above completely. I'm just changing the anchor points in After Effects. I just kind of eyeballed that. I don't think they're perfectly on the ground, but the idea is that it tracks. That's all this purpose is. I don't actually need those things. I could just delete them. Although I do like to keep this solid. In our case, I'm just going to undo to get back to my red solid. A small red solid, not the giant one. Because that's all I need. So once this step is done, we can move on to the next step. And remember, the next step is, in our case, is the Cinema 4D step. Check, check. Everybody with me so far? Let's export this. File, export. Maxon Cinema 4D exporter. You're gonna get this error. It's gonna say, hey, you have 2D layers. My video footage, the red solid, those are not gonna be exported. That's fine. I'm gonna recreate that in Cinema 4D. Most important thing is just the camera being exported. This thing, the 3D tracker camera. That's all we want exported. Or that's all we can have exported. I'll click OK. It's going to ask you where to save it. Call this Garden 2025. Because there's multiple steps here, multiple C4D files, I always just call this like the After Effects one, AE. Click Save. Now, if I go and find that file, double click it. If you don't have After Effects, but you do have, if you don't have Cinema 4D, but you do have After Effects, if you double click it, it should just pop up C4D Lite. Before you move over to Cinema 4D, you need to feel good about your track in After Effects. Problem students make often is that they think things are going to get better if they keep going down the road of the pipeline. It doesn't get better. It gets worse. Maybe that's like true about life too, not just camera tracking in virtual production scenarios. But if it looks like crap in After Effects, it's going to look even worse and you're wasting your time. If it doesn't track, you have two options. One, use a better piece of software, something that's more dedicated. Two, reshoot. All right, now we're in Cinema 4D. So let's start going through this process. Cinema 4D, we are going to set up the scene so we get back to pretty much this. Okay, so first thing is that I'm going to go to Create in Cinema 4D, Create menu. I'm not an expert at Cinema 4D, but I do know how to do this pipeline with it. Create, Environment, Background. And it's going to make a big gray thing behind everything. Here in this outliner view, you can see we have a background. And this right here is what's imported from After Effects. There's the root, then the 3D camera tracker, and then the solid. We're messing around with the background right now, though. So the background is gray. Let's create a new material. A lot of different ways to create materials in 3D softwares, but probably the easiest is just to go to the little material icon here. I am using a 2025 C4D Lite, so if you're using a different version, things might be in slightly different places, but probably not. So here's the material menu. I'm going to click on the plus icon to create a new material. It makes a blank material. I'm going to double click this, call this BG for background. And then when you click on these things, you should see them pop up in the attributes menu down bottom. We want to go to the color tab, and we're going to go to texture. And if you click the little empty box here where a file string should be for the location, it should pop up Explorer. So I'm going to browse to wherever my files are. Just the first one. Click open. It's going to give you this warning about, in my case, these images are just on my downloads folder. They're not in the same location as the project. I don't care. So I just say no, because I don't want the files to be copied to the folder's location. Maybe you do for whatever reason. That's up to you. I'm going to click no. All right, so we see the video on the material, but it's still gray in the window. That's all right. It's not playing. That's okay. We have a lot more to do. So let's change this gray on the background here to the material. So what we need to do is we need to grab onto this material. A lot of different ways to do this, but I'm just going to drag and drop. Grab onto the material and drag it on top of the background. So you see the material there is attached to the background, and in the main viewport you can see it, although it looks very low res, but we'll help with that in a second. The low resness, if you don't care about the low res, or you don't even care about doing the background, you can start to skip some of these steps if you just know it's going to work. I just like to do these, one, to show you all, and two, just to make sure that everything is okay. So I don't want to go through this whole thing, get to Unreal, and then realize I messed something up in After Effects. All right, so now we have the material on the background. If I scrub the timeline, nothing happens. The video doesn't play. The camera moves, but the video doesn't play. So there's a couple things that we have to do. Clicking on the material in the color menu again, if you scroll down, we want to have this set to animation instead of shader. And then if you scroll down more to the animation section, I'm going to click the calculate button. Calculate button will determine that this is an image sequence and give you the number of frames. Remember I said earlier it's 243 frames. It determined that. Now it's okay. But still, if I scrub the timeline, nothing's happening. It's not playing. Again, by default, video textures are very intense on the computer. They don't play by default. because the software wants to make sure that you know what you're doing first. To get this to work, we need to click on the viewport tab, viewports, and two things. Toggle the box for animate preview, and then it should immediately be able to be played. And the next thing is, if you want to increase the resolution of that texture, you can change texture preview size from default to something bigger. So as soon as I click animation preview, the video jumps and it plays as I scrub the timeline now. Good. I'm also going to increase that resolution, like I said. If your computer's absolutely dying, then you're not going to be able to increase this very much. But I have a bunch of stuff open right now, so it'll probably be okay. All right, so we have that playing. Plays kind of slow because it's pretty intense on the computer. Is the plane sticking? Sometimes you can tell right away, other times it's harder to tell. Now that it's cached, it will play a little faster. Anybody can see the grid kind of raise up and raise down a little bit? Right there at the end, especially. Here, let me try to zoom in. Let's see, right there. The grid raises up on her foot a lot. That's okay, but it also raises up on the solid. I think that's because these things are not actually sitting on the grid. So let's take a look at from the side. I'm just holding down Alt and left mouse button to change this view. And look at that. The grid is right here and the solid is up here. We need the solid to be down here, but it's not. Remember, I don't want to move the solid like I just did. Right now I'm grabbing onto the solid. This is not going to solve my problem. I don't want to grab on the solid and move the solid. I want to grab not on the tracker camera either. I want to grab on the root here. In this case, cells tracking 01. So if I click on that, that means that I'm moving everything, not just the solid, but the camera as well. So I'm taking the camera and the solid and I'm lowering them a little bit to situate them so that the solid is on the grid. How much so? Well, let's take a look. So if I click on that root right there and I go down to the attributes panel and coordinates, I can see that this location right here where all of those handles meet is located in 3D space at -960 by 540. Anybody know where those numbers might come from? Why is it those numbers in my case? What would those numbers correspond to? It's what? But where the, that's what it is, but why those numbers in my case? If you doubled those numbers, 1920 by 1080, that happens to be the middle point of my footage, which is also, well, it would be different if it wasn't 1920 by 1080 footage, but in my case it is. It's not super important, but I just thought that was kind of neat. So in my case, I need to make this Y value lower. You can see the grid move there as I lower this number, right? Or raise it up. Let's look at this from the side. There's the grid. Now I've made it worse. Now I've made it closer. Anybody want to guess what number we're trying to plug in here? 0. You want to zero it out, right? So I'm trying to make the Y value just 0. So just type 0. You don't have to manually do this. Now the plane Oops. Now the plane is right on the grid, right? That's what we want. And if you wanted to, you could zero out the X value too. Doesn't matter. In this case, then when we bring this plane into Unreal Engine, in Unreal, the plane center will be right at 0, 0, 0 as well. That sun starts coming out and gets too crazy for y'all, don't hesitate to put that down. All right. So now I play it. Solids on the grid. Seems kind of like the same thing's happening, but it was sliding a little bit. Now it's not sliding at all. So that's it. If you were happy with this and you didn't want to do any more previews, we would move on to the next step, bringing this over into Unreal. I'm going to do a couple extra things here just to feel better about this camera track. So I'm going to bring in some primitive shapes in C4D. C4D people, if you wanted to just build in C4D, this is where you could just start building in C4D. Everything else is done. The camera track's done. All right, so I'm going to go up to Create and Mesh. And what do we want to put in here? Maybe a bunch of little figures, just little characters that are currently very, very tiny. I'll scale these guys up. Oops, where's he at? Figure. Just going to go over to the coordinates menu and maybe scale these guys up. 10, 10, 10. Maybe a little bigger. 15, 15, 15. Notice that when I put it in, it situated itself right on the grid, which is what we want. He's standing in the dirt. So now if I move it around, careful moving things around. It's okay moving in this case in the, well, I guess in C4D, up is Y, right? And back and to the side is X and Z. In this case, I want to move just in X and Z. I don't want to move it up because I want this guy to stand on the ground. So just be careful when you're moving things around that you're moving what you want to move. See that in case I grabbed onto the Z. Stuff's happening. For me, this never gets old. I'm like, this always blows my mind. So cool. Again, you don't have to do that step. I just like to put objects in there just to feel good about things before I move on to the next step. It's always good just to preview. Any questions? Questions? Here's some things to think about. This is standing on very bumpy ground. When I start to try to put 3D elements into this scene, it's going to be pretty weird when if they're on bumpy ground, but they're just standing on a flat surface. So we might have to think about recreating the ground, building a bumpy terrain out of 3D for them to stand on. Obviously, that is very specific to this video footage, but it's something to think about. And in this other project, I also put down a grid if you wanted to do that. But let's just stick with this. You know what? There's actually something a little weird with this guy over on the left. He's kind of drifting a little bit, I noticed. What's up with that? This is why I put these things here, because if it's a problem now, it's going to be a problem in Unreal Engine, and I'd rather figure it out now. Let's watch this again. Yeah, see, the guy on the left is not sticking. The other ones look okay, although their feet aren't showing when the bad part happens. What's up with this guy? He's on the grid. He's on the grid. That's okay. You know, it's probably because my initial track here was so warped. Which is why it's extra important to find a flat area that looks good and not have your grid be super warped. It's like when I scaled this up here, remember how tilted looking it got? That actually looks like it should be more like this than like this. So if it doesn't look good in After Effects, it's not going to look good here. I think that's probably why there's a little bit of drifting. But it's also hard to notice these things until you get into a 3D program like C4D. So if you notice drifting now and they're on the floor, you've done all the other steps, this is where I might want to go back to After Effects, repick new points, and go through it again. In our case, in the interest of time right now, I think I'm just going to roll forward with this one, but let the record show that I am not happy with this. Especially when it gets exacerbated more that when it's over here. Yeah. And also remember, we put our target right here. This was the area where the target was. So this is the most accurate area because we're using those points to create the ground plane. It makes sense that this would be, if it wasn't perfect to begin with, it makes sense that it would be even more out of alignment over on this edge here. So in our case, let's just delete that guy. We're not going to put anything over there. Just close our eyes and ignore that there's a problem right now. Everything else, these guys look okay. But for you, that's something to think about. Make sure. That's why I like to preview in C4D before we even get into Unreal. Place objects wherever that you think you're going to put CG in Unreal. All right, good. Let's export. So file, save for Cineware. File, save for Cineware. Let's call this Garden 2025. C4D. And that's saved. Next step, Unreal Engine. Okay, so our first step was to go to Edit Plugins and make sure a couple plugins are turned on. we want to make sure the Datasmith C4D importer is turned on and the Datasmith importer is turned on, and also the image plate plugin is turned on. I've already turned all of these on in the interest of time, but when you turn them on, it's going to ask you down here on the right to restart the editor. All right, next step, let's import the C4D file. So we don't use the add button or the import button down here in the content browser. We go up to place actors, the little plus button, the green plus with the cube. And down here, assuming you've turned on the plugin, you go to Datasmith, file import. Browse to wherever you saved that at. Double click it. It's going to ask you where you want to put it. I guess I'll create a new folder for it. Just call this C4D. Click OK. It's going to ask me what I want to import. That's fine. I don't have any lights, but it would be nice to bring the geometry in. It's going to bring those little figures in, the little stick figures. Import. Now they're in my world. And if I browse to I put it in the C4D folder, and here's another folder. This is where all the files are. In the animations folder, there is a level sequence. Double click the level sequence. Don't create your own. And here, wherever this camera is, it's up here somewhere. Here is the camera. This is the motion trail for the camera. This is the actual movement that was made by me when I handheld this camera in that garden. And if I look through the viewport, clicking on the little camera icon, now I'm looking through the viewport. Does this seem like the motion from the original video? It's impossible to tell until you're comparing it directly against the video. So that's the next step. We have to bring the video into Unreal. And this is not anything that we haven't done before. We need to go to Add, Media, Image Media Source. While we're here, I'm just going to add the other things, Media, Media Player. Click the checkbox for Media Texture. Okay. Just create all those all at once. So the IMS file, the image media source file, the media player, and the media texture. I'm going to double click on the image media source file. Remember, the image media source file is the location and frame rate of your images. Over here it says sequence path. Click the 3 dots. Browse to wherever that is. And manually set the frame rate. 30. You can do a different frame rate. You just need to make sure that it's the same from After Effects footage, After Effects, Cinema 4D in our case, Unreal. If there's a mismatch between them, there's going to be problems. You can go ahead and click the open button up top to make sure that it's going to work. And it does. Click save. Close this down. Don't need to open it up again. It's always a good time to save all. Okay. Let's go back to that sequence. Remember, the sequence isn't going to be up here because you haven't dragged it into the level from the content browser. You could drag it into the level and then it would be up here, but you don't really have to. If you lose this window, you can always go back to the folder that got imported with Datasmith, go to animations, double click it there, will open up. Okay, so I have my video. Now I need to create a media track in Sequencer. So add in Sequencer, media track. Click on the little plus next to media, media source. Find the media. And that's good. See, it's the same size as the number of keyframes I have. And that problem I told you earlier where I forgot to change it to 30, it was a lot longer than the number of keyframes that I had. There's nothing to play still because we haven't set that up yet. We haven't put it in the world yet. So now I need to put it in the world. I have my camera moving. I have the video footage in Sequencer. It's supposedly playing, but I need to attach it to my camera so I can actually see it. So over here in the outliner, pick the 3D tracker camera. And assuming that you turned on the plugin for image plates, go to the add button while clicked on the 3D camera tracker. And we are looking for image plate. Image plate. There's image plate. Still seems like nothing happened. I'm going to pop out of my camera here. I'm going to unclick the camera to eject from it. And if I look really, really close, I can see my image plate right there. Remember, we need to drag it out. This is what I was talking about before, making sure that you are in local coordinates. Local. If I was in world coordinates when I drag this out, but now it's going to drag not parallel to the camera. It's dragging it a little askew. So make sure that you are in local. Where do I drag this to? Behind whatever it is that you are trying to put into the world. Or behind whatever you want to put in front of the video, basically. Here's a little preview. Now when I look through the camera, it's not hooked up to my video footage yet, but soon we're getting close. So I need to add a material of the video footage to the image plate. If I click on the image plate in 3D tracker camera, scroll down. This used to be right up top. Now it's a little hidden, which is annoying. Oh, there we go. The image plate section. I need to add the material that has my video texture to this. But I don't think we created a material yet. So let's go back into Content Browser. We're going to right click on our media texture. This is just like we did before with that Miley footage. Right click on media texture, go to create material. I can go ahead and drag the material onto the image plates material slot. And everything should turn black. So we haven't played it yet. I'm going to double click the material too. and make it unlit, so it's not affected by lights. So I'm going to drag RGB to emissive color. I'm going to go to blend mode and change blend mode to, not blend mode, I'm going to change shading model from default lit to unlit. Save that. Close this down. Now, if I go back to sequencer, still nothing's happening. So we forgot the step that we always forget to do. We need to right click on the film strip, go to properties, and assign the media texture here. Right now it's none. Right click, properties, media texture, find the one that you made. Oh, there it is. Seems like stuff's happening. It's very washed out, like I said, was a possible problem. I'm going to delete this floor, the default floor in Unreal Engine here. We don't need that. Also, I'm not even sure that that's aligned to the grid. So I'm going to get rid of the floor. It's a little jumpy. If your computer's slow and it's buffering the video, you might see some misalignment that happens. Don't freak out. It might not actually be a problem. If you think you did everything right and it just seems like your computer's slow and the camera's moving faster than the video can keep up, try going frame by frame and see if the problem happens. Sometimes I'll play it and it will look good and then all of a sudden it looks bad. And it's not because I did anything wrong. It's just that the computers can't keep up with the footage. So it gets out of sync. That's not a problem you actually have to worry about. If you really are paranoid, you go ahead and render it out and the render won't be unsynced unless you do have some sort of other problem. But that buffering can cause misalignment too. I'm just going to turn off this exponential height fog that's in the default map because it's making everything kind of blue. I don't need that. And ta-da! Minus the buffering lag there, it's tracked. A lot of buffering lag there. That's step 3 of our pipeline. So at this point, now we go and build the world. And then once we're done with the world, we can export that, which we will demo next week. A lot of lag because I have so many programs open. If you find that your computer does have a lot of lag and it's really driving you nuts, you can make proxy versions of your footage, which is in video editing terms, they're just lower resolution versions of your footage. So in my case, these are not high res. They're 1080p PNGs. They're also PNGs, so those are a little slower too. But maybe I do 720 versions or something if I'm really lagging out. Other things that you can do, you can go to edit project settings. And assuming you don't have a terrible computer, where's this at? You can go down to media profile. No. Let's image it. No, what's this called? You can essentially you can add more cache to, you add more RAM to Unreal to prevent the buffering from happening. IMG media? Yeah, that's it. So if you go down to IMG media, in this section, you can, add more cache size, assuming you have the memory to do it. Also, if you use EXR files, it would be faster. The EXR files are going to be gigantic, but they will process faster because they're not compressed like a PNG file is. Next week, we will look at EXR files because that's what actual VFX artists mostly use rather than PNG files. But in our case today, PNG is fine. A couple other things. Here's that one problem, the diagonal black line of doom. That happens when you're actually clicked on your camera. So if I click off of it, it disappears. If I click on it, it's there. I actually have it selected right now. If I select the solid instead, it disappears. So if that happens to you, don't freak out. Just click on something else. Make your changes to the camera or do whatever you have to do and then click on something else. Other things to look at here. The footage is really washed out. Let's try to get it back to something that looks like this. Where's it? Let's try to get it back to something that looks like this. So there's a couple things going on here. The auto exposure is happening and the tone mapper is happening. So if I click on the camera and I scroll down here in the details panel, I could just type in exposure. Let's pick metering mode. Set this to metering mode and then set the min and max, the darkest and brightest automatic it can be. Make these the same numbers. It may depend what looks good for you. If I put in 2 here, notice that my footage is getting really dark now. If I put in -2, it should get really bright. If I put in 0, it's still a little bright. Maybe I'll just put in 1. It's closer. This is why Unreal Engine is not a compositing program. To make films with Unreal Engine, it's a little hacky, actually. Other thing that we can do is turn off the tone mapper. So with the 3D camera tracker selected, I just typed in tone. I'm going to go to tone curve amount and set this to 0. Unclick the camera. Now this looks much closer, if not almost exactly like it. So I like to turn that off, get a look at it, make sure everything looks good. But when I go and render out my foreground and background elements, which we'll do next week, I turn the tone mapper back on because it makes everything else in Unreal usually look better. Unless you want to do all the color grading in post-production, which is something that we can do because we are rendering out 16-bit EXR files from Unreal. But you wouldn't want to do that with PNG files or JPEGs. Questions? It's a lot of steps. A lot of steps, but not crazy difficult. You just got to follow the lots of steps. If I went back to, go back to After Effects and look at the green screen one real quick. Maybe I'll do this one in a speed run, all right? I'm not going to talk through every step now. I'm just going to go through it. This is the green screen footage. This is what it looks like. I'm going to go to the tracker, track camera, let it process. In some ways, this one's easier to track. There's less things to track, but it's more obvious if things are tracking well or not because you can see the tracking marks on the ground rather than them being bumpy pieces of dirt, which you aren't exactly sure where the tracking mark is. If you were to use like a real pro tracking software, you go in and you could actually say, this is a tracking mark, manually track. This is a tracking mark, manually track. But it's very tedious. But at least then you know exactly what's being tracked. When you have the paper, make some tracking marks. You could do like I showed in the slides, where you just put tracking marks on the floor, tape. Oh, my screen is, do you see that? No. Sometimes when I'm running HDMI and OBS and Unreal and After Effects and everything, my screen starts flickering, but that looks fine. I'll make do. So this just has some marks on the floor. But this is less ideal than the paper because there's no green screen below their waist, right? So that big fancy wall, paper's better. All right, so I did the camera track here. The tracked points are very teeny tiny. So I'm gonna make them a little larger, track point size. Maybe I'll make them even larger, just so you can see. All right. Now check this out. Now I can actually see the tracking marks on the floor. That one looks pretty good right there. Is that noise me? Or somebody's chair? I think it's the video. This one looks pretty good, I think. If I selected these ones and this one, these ones, is that okay? Could be. But I think I actually liked this one better. Think that looks good? Yes, yes. All right, right click, set ground plane and origin. Right click again, create solid and camera. Now play it. See how that solid looks. It's hard to tell on green screen because there's not a lot to compare it against. So sometimes something that I'll do, this is not mission critical, this is just to test. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll click on my solid and scale it up so it's covering a couple tracking marks, and then I'll lower down the opacity on it. And then I'll get the pen tool and mask out shape in the tracking mark corners. And then turn it back up. And then see how well it sticks. You can see there's a little bit of drift. Not devastating, but also not perfect. Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. If this is good enough and this is going to work, then just take it. If it does need to be better, then go back and try the track again. You should feel good about this step before you move on to the other ones. Am I happy with this? Can we get it better? I don't know. You could see. I think in the interest of time, though, we'll just roll with this one. I'm going to unmask that. I'm going to delete the mask on that so it's just a solid again. And then move to the C4D part. File, export, Maxon Cinema 4D exporter. Ignore that. Green screen, 2025. Find that file. Open it up in Cinema. There it is. Camera's moving. Need to add a background. Create. Environment. Background. It's gray right now because I need to create a material. Click on Material tab. Click on Add Material. Drag the material on the background. Go down to the Color tab. Click on the Texture window to browse for the file. What is this file? Open. No. Scroll down. Click Calculate on Animation. Go up. Go to Viewport. Click the preview for Animate Preview. Increase the texture preview size to make it look a little bit better. Now it should play. If I look from the side, I can see that the plane is not on the grid. So I click on the root there, top. I go to coordinates. I change this 540 to 0. Your number might be different depending on your footage's size. But now the plane is on the ground. Looks good. You wanted to add other things to preview, you could. Sometimes it's good to just place objects on the tracking marks too and see how much they drift. On green screen, it can be hard to tell, but if you put it on a tracking mark, you will definitely see the slip. It's going to look like that one in the background is on top of her, but that's just because she's not rotoscoped out. Also, that column in the foreground comes around. There's a little slip down in the bottom right here with this guy. But again, it's going to depend on what your end result is. If your end result relies on just putting some objects in the foreground and you kind of cover up her feet a little bit, you can get away with a lot more. You don't need to have a perfect track. If you need to have these characters stick to very specific marks on the ground, that in the case of green screen, that doesn't matter. Then you have to be a little bit more nuanced about it. I would say that the green screen, you can get away with more with green screen because we're not actually placing these guys on pieces of dirt. Unlike the one in the garden where you need to put the 3D object and it needs to stay on top of the dirt in that spot of dirt, you will notice if it floats around. But with the green screen, less so. especially if you cover up her feet a little bit. All right, if you feel good about that, we can go to File, Save for Cineware. Export for Cineware, go over to Unreal. Turn on our plugins, remember. The Datasmith plugins, turn those on. The image plate plugin, turn that on. Restart. Go up to the quick add button, Datasmith, file import, green screen 2025. That's the one I did. Create a new folder here. Click OK. That all looks good. Make sure that you import the animations. If you have animations unchecked, you're not going to get your level sequence. If you have cameras unchecked, you're not going to import the camera with the keyframes. Import. Comes right in. Browse to the folder, the animations folder. That's where the level sequence is. There it is. Let me delete this floor, the default floor in Unreal. Now I need to make the stuff for the media. Media, image media source, the media plate, oops, or the media player. Check the box for media texture. Right. Double click on the image media source file, browse to wherever that is. Oops. Open it up, set the frame rate. Click open to make sure it opens. Click save. All right. Let's go ahead and right click our texture to create a material. Open up the material. I like to make it unlit because I'm controlling the color in my footage. Make the RGB emissive color, go over to shading model, unlit. You're not going to see anything right now because the video is not playing. Close that down. Go ahead and save. We need to add the image plate to our camera. Go ahead and click on your camera. Click the add button in the components, image plate. Add the image plate. I'm going to drag out the image plate from the camera. I made a mistake right there. When I was clicked on the camera, I was actually moving the camera. We have keyframes for this camera. The camera movement is very precise and been gone from After Effects to Cinema 4D into Unreal. Make sure that you don't jump into the camera and, you know, pilot it somewhere else. Like, don't do this because you're going to look back at the camera and you might edit your keyframes. You don't want to do that. Let's grab the image plate though, or let's create the image plate first. So add image plate, click on it, pops up right there. Let's drag it out. Drag it out. Where do we drag it out to? Behind our stuff. Sometimes it's just easier to drag the number over here rather than in the world. Sometimes your world is really big. You need to pull it back. There we go. Go back to sequencer and look. We still need to put the video texture back there. That's easy enough to do. Click on image plate in the 3D camera tracker, scroll down to the image plate section with the material. Change this to the right material that we made. What's this called? M_GS. There it is. Turns black because we don't have anything controlling it yet. Now we need to create a media track in sequencer. So click the add button, media track. Media track, click the plus, media source. Make sure that you drag this back to the beginning. Still nothing because we need to right click on it, go to properties, assign it the media texture. Now it should start to work in Unreal. Looks a little blue because my height fog's here. I'm going to delete the height fog, the default height fog. Looks like there's the tone mapper and stuff that we could turn off, but I think that's all right for right now. You know what? Let me just turn it off. Tone curve. Exposure. Set the max and min for exposure to something that looks good. It's a little dark. Remember, how the video looks in Unreal is never going to matter. It's just for previs because we're going to put the video back on in post-production after we render out the environment from Unreal. That's kind of back to where we were. So in case of compositing here, you notice I have a character that's behind her, right? So when we render this out from Unreal next week, we'll be able to have these as separate renders. So we could have your character in the background, foreground element. Usually I just do foreground and background. Sometimes there's a couple more layers than that, but foreground and background. But right now you're not going to see that. So you just have to use your imagination. And there are ways using Unreal's compositing system called Composure where you can assign things and you would see it actually composited, but that's kind of too tedious to teach to you guys anymore. Especially now that I teach the wall and the green screen in one semester. All right, looks like it's going to work. Now we could actually go and build a world. Things to think about. If your footage is particularly bad and you don't want to reshoot, you could think about breaking it up into multiple cuts. Maybe you have one part that tracks good and you track that, and then you have to figure out a way to have a cut. So you're going to have to introduce a cut, but then use the other chunk of footage. That can help you salvage something that is not working out. But otherwise, kind of just need to practice it a little bit. Err on the side of using more tracking marks because at least you have data with green screen. In the real world environment, you're not going to need tracking marks for the most part, unless it's like a table or something like that. Shooting on location, if you're shooting in a real world place and there's not a lot of floor shown, it's sometimes a good idea to introduce like foreground objects that you're going to mask out. But no, let's take this back. If you're shooting on green screen and there's not a lot of floor, like in the studio in there, sometimes it can be a good idea to put like some light stands up and put some sort of flags on there, because those will be in the shot in camera. You're going to mask them out, but they're just there to help the tracker solve. Because if it's just seeing the back wall of green screen paper or green screen LED wall, it's not a lot of data to track. And the software, especially After Effects software, it's not very smart. It needs more data to solve things. If you're using more of the pro software, you could go in and probably solve it manually, but we don't have time to do that. Questions? This is tracked in Blender too. So you could do all of this in Blender. Same idea. But you're not going to be, the exporting from Blender to Unreal is going to be a little bit different. You could, for people that are more comfortable with Blender, you could just export the camera. You could bake all the keyframes and then export the camera with the animation data as an FBX file. And then you can bring that into Unreal Engine. The pipeline's a little bit different because we're not bringing in Datasmith. In that case, I guess you could do this with any 3D program. This is how I used to do it before Datasmith made things easier. If you make a sequence and then in the little wrench icon here, you click that, you can go up to import, and you can import an FBX file with the camera data in it. And then it will import as a track and all the keyframes will be right there. Similar sort of idea, but less clean. If you know how to use USD files, you can use USD files to like export your whole world from Blender or Maya. Maya, you could use Maya. If you're using After Effects, you can use Maya Live Link from After Effects to Maya. I haven't tested this. This is what I used to use years ago, but I haven't tested it because they stopped updating it. But it seemingly works again now. I'm not sure if it still does. Let's check. Updated. Oh, okay. There you go. Supports After Effects 25. Maybe I'll start using that again then. If you just wanted to do your tracking completely in Blender or C4D, you could do that. A lot of different ways to do different things. But I think what I showed with After Effects and C4D into Unreal, that's kind of the easiest way. It's not the best, but it works pretty all right. So for next week, I just need you to shoot something and then make a post about what you shot. Just your raw footage. That's the assignment. Shoot green screen, on location footage with and without camera movements. I don't know what your creative briefs are, but do what you feel is right. I just want you to shoot enough different types of footage that you can try different scenarios. Okay. I'm not expecting like the most brilliant story in the world. This is more of a technical exercise. But shoot some variation in different footages so you have stuff to work with. Okay. And that post is due next week. Just the footage. You don't have to do any of the tracking or the keying even. Just the footage. And then in 2 weeks, it's all due. And next week, we will go over the final comp, where we'll composite everything together. Questions? You want to do the tracking in Blender? So you want to use After Effects at all? No After Effects. Just Blender. Then you just need to get the camera from Blender into Unreal. There are some older tutorials on YouTube that use, I think it's an outdated Blender to Unreal plugin. I think that no longer works, but that's what a lot of people used to use. I think the most foolproof way would be, I'm not sure if I can do it right now, because I'm not a Blender expert, but if I have this camera movement in Blender, and I select my camera, and I go to File, Export, FBX. Anybody want to help me out how I can make sure that I'm actually exporting my camera keyframes? Is there some way that is there something that I need to do to bake them down? Does anybody know? Nobody's going to help me out. Apply transformation? No. Let's just try it like this. Export Blender test. I have a feeling like this is going to miss the keyframes. Then I go back to Unreal. Make a new level sequence. And then I go to the wrench icon in the level sequence. And I go to Import. Yes, create cameras. Don't reduce keys. Import. Yeah, see, it didn't bring the keyframes over. So I feel like I'm missing some dumb Blender step where I have to bake the keys down. But I need to think about that for a minute. Apply transfer? No Blender experts? You're just watching me drowned right now. I heard this snicker. Yeah, I have to think about it. I don't know Blender enough to do that. But I'm sure we could Google it or ChatGPT it. Yeah, of course. But something like that. That plugin that used to work, I used to use that too, Blender to Unreal, but I feel like it doesn't work anymore. And it was kind of convoluted. You had to install the plugin in Unreal, and there was like some Python script. It was not simple, but it did work. But now definitely importing like the FBX with the keyframes baked, at least that will be there, but it's not. It brought the camera, but not the keyframes.
So you say the simplest ways using stability.
Yeah, but the tracking's not as good. A lot of the better tracking softwares, like standalone tracking softwares, they'll have a way to export like directly for C4D, directly. I don't know about directly for Unreal, but directly for 3D package because that's what they're made for, right? Directly for Maya. After Effects. I think there are ways to get like After Effects to Blender. So if you want to use After Effects to do the tracking, you could bring it into Blender. But I feel like if you're going to use Blender, you might as well just do the tracking in Blender. You know what I mean? There's nothing special about After Effects tracking. It's just you push the button and cross your fingers and hope for the best. It's simple, right? But not the best. Yeah, I usually use one called Buju, but it's very expensive and proprietary. Cool. Anything else? That's all. We leave a little space for questions, which there appear to be none. But